And it says we are live. Everyone, good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for chiming in. Today, we have something special for you. I'm your host, LaCora Stevens, executive producer of The Yes Show, Young, Entertaining, and Saved. And we have this wonderful Juneteenth series that we're going to speak to five wonderful people of the communities, leaders and thinkers, to discuss Juneteenth as well as specific roles in this fight, dare I say, the 21st century civil rights movement. So, for our first series, we are going to discuss the church in the racial divide. Everyone, I have a dear pastor that I saw from afar, and I said, who is this man? I have to speak with him. He goes by the name of Pastor William D. Smart. Everyone, let's welcome him. Hello, hello, hello. How are you, Pastor?
I'm great, Miss Stevens, and thank you for having me on your show. And it's wonderful to be here on Juneteenth as we celebrate that important event and as we move forward at such a time as this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of the word celebrate, a lot of people are probably wondering, well, Juneteenth, I've heard of Juneteenth. I'm so not so familiar with it. Would you like to share what Juneteenth is?
Juneteenth was a time when the general got to Galveston, Texas, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, and told them they were free, that the slaves that they were free. And so at that time, they like to say that for the first time, the whole Union was of slaves was free because for 2 years they kept them captivated in captivity in Texas. And
Mm,
some people like to sugarcoat it and say Texas, it was because of how remote Texas was, but in reality, it was the rate then white supremacy tried to get as much work out of them as they possibly could to the end, till the
sounds
Union came.
sounds very familiar of today.
Yes, ma'am.
We're going to speak on that. Understand, everyone, that this is about freedom, celebration, and today we're going to. My focus is to break the chains of religion and focus on relationship because a lot of times in the church, a lot of people during this time of the murder of Mr. George Floyd, still there are a lot of parishioners that are disconnected and they are very unclear as to where they stand when it comes to race relations. So I'm trying to become free of religion and get into the relationship, the word, God's heart, because I'm not truly seeing that from some churches, some parishioners. So, Pastor Smart, we're going to start with the small bio. Some people are wondering, well, who is this wonderful man, LaCora? Talk to me a little bit about him. So, give us a brief bio about your background.
Well, I was born and raised in Connecticut, and from there I went to Birmingham, Alabama, where I attended Miles College. From there I went to Duke Divinity School in Durham, and then I started my full-time ministry career in Forest City, Arkansas, then Tennessee, then Washington, D.C., then Los Angeles. And in between there, I always had a quest for liberating African American people. In particular, I went to Birmingham to Miles because I felt that state was the second hardest state where African Americans got the right to vote. And so I wanted to being raised in the North. I wanted to come to the South and really learn about my heritage and
Mm.
my Africanism and also help with the struggle. So I got involved very much so around Birmingham and Alabama, my 4 years there. And one of the greatest things is I got on the board of the Los Angeles chapter of the SCLC.
Yes.
And some of the old pioneers of the civil rights movement were still alive there, Abraham Woods and others. And so they really cultivated me. And from there, I've always been. I was a president of a NAACP in Jackson, but deep down in my heart, I was always a SCLC man because I was a strong disciple of Dr. Martin Luther King. And
Mm.
throughout my life, I shared personal time with all of the lieutenants, all of the men and women that were around him with the exception of him. And so I that's why, to this day I like to say that I'm a third generation disciple of Dr. King.
I love it. And I did some research on that and I saw how, the foundation of the church that you represent, you said SCLC. What does
Yes.
that stand for?
That's the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. That's the organization that Dr. King established with others in Louisiana in 1957, right after the 1956, right after the Montgomery boycott. They said that, okay, we have to widen the scope to really get rid of prejudice and racism, and so that's the organization they developed. And he actually came out to Los Angeles in 1962 and founded our chapter here.
And I would say, speaking of Martin Luther King and speaking of you, because if this is at the foundation, the core of SCLC, when I first saw you, Pastor Smart, I
Hmm.
said, well, who is this brother? You were at an event, I believe it was June 8th. It was the clergy as well as Black Lives Matter. It was a memorial. Could you talk to me about that event? And then I'm going to tell the people what stood out for me when I saw a videotape.
Okay. Okay. One of our brothers, Pastor Q, had a vision that on the day of George Floyd's funeral, that we would have four different processions from different parts from around the country, the county, San Bernardino, I'm sorry, San Fernando, Long Beach, um, down in, of course, Crenshaw. We had 2,013 cars come out of Crenshaw
Mm.
and Long Beach and Orange County. And so we converged on downtown, the corner of Broadway and First Street, and it was a beautiful thing that we had four hearses to represent that, and so there was a black. It was a we had some of the families from Black Lives Matter and
Mhm.
others, and the leader of a local, um, Dr. Molina, and several other people that really spoke that day.
Yes, and during the memorial, like you said, it was a lot of people there in support. But one thing happened: the police officers, as they always do, they came out, they were surrounding, and I have a friend. He was the videographer that day, and he posted it on his Instagram. And what I witnessed was you in your full totality, your full strength. You were
Hmm.
shooing off the police officers. You were adamant. You said, why are you even here? Get away from here. Just give us peace. And I had never, and most Christians, we are trained to be very passive. We are supposed to be reserved. We are supposed to simply, keep quiet, don't say too
Hmm.
much, don't disturb, don't ruffle the feathers. But what I saw was you demanding control for them to leave and to have
Right,
peace. And I
right.
said, this is a pastor. And so I
Mhm.
want to know, number one, what stirred that inside of you to even say that? Because a lot of
Well,
pastors will not.
Well, it goes back. I was trained by some powerful men and women in this movement, and I'm talking about dating back to when I was 7 and 8 years old, where I first got active, strong from my watching my father, and then watching different pastors that surrounded me who were real activists, and then as I evolved and later in life, and even the type of wife I have and the type of children we're raising that you have. And so all of my life, I've been speaking truth to power. And so I thought the police were wrong and the sheriff's department was wrong. And it's this same cycle that they move into when they want to take control. And we were exercising our right, and I just spoke to it. I told them to get out of here because on this day that we are honoring George Floyd, that you guys shot and killed another black brother down, and they wanted to shut it down. And we said, you're not going to shut it down. You're going to get out of here. We want you out of here. Why do you continuously do this? And this is why I have moved to the position that the police need to be defunded, because they are not, I think we can reimagine public safety a totally different way without police force. The United States police force is totally out of control, and
Yes.
it has galvanized us. I'm sick and tired of another black person getting shot and killed. And still, just yesterday in Compton, they took a brother down rough in a way, and he was saying, I can't breathe. And you see 20 sheriffs coming for one brother, and they say he threw away some dope. And the important thing is there is a way to engage with people that they haven't learned yet. And they haven't learned it in Atlanta, they haven't learned it in Louisville, and they haven't learned it in Minneapolis. And so you have to tell them, you have to be bold enough. And I'm just, I'm of age, Miss Stevens, where I just, I have lived a liberation life, and it's inculcated into me. And so I'm just not going to sit down or let them get away with anything.
That's good. And I agree with that. I know when I saw it, I said, this is my type of pastor. I, we as
Mm.
people, we as Christian parishioners have been tamed for so long. Even when this started with Trayvon Martin years ago, a lot of the churches, when Black Lives Matter movement started, they were like, oh, no, 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 not Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. And these were Black bishops, Black pastors. And a lot of them don't stand up to the cause of saying that we need police reform. They don't stand up to the fact by saying, people, we need to be active. Instead of what I'm seeing is sit down and pray. It's the taming of the pew, dare I
Yeah.
say. Yeah. And
Yeah. Well, yeah, Miss Stevens, is really, where you're watching and where you're going. Because let me just say one thing.
yes.
They're right. They're saying reform. We don't want to use the word reform because the president's using that word, and they've talking about reform for the last 30 years and nothing happened. That's why we say we just need to abolish them. We need to defund them, and we need to start all over, a new reimagine what public safety ought to look like. And I'm going as far as to say that I want to start meeting with some African American brothers who can say, and talk about brothers keepers, and talking about manning up programs so that we can begin to correct and work with our brothers and sisters in the streets ourselves, especially around mental health. When you call on these people and we end up shot. No, we need a whole new vision about what's going on, Miss Stevens, with these police. But the church, I'm 61. I've been in the church all my life. I mean, I've been in the church all my life. You're
Mhm.
going to get different types of churches, different type of pastors, different types of teachings. You
Yes.
have to discover which one fits you. I grew up, like I said, I grew up in at the time a church. I grew up in the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, a CME church. One of the things that I'm proud of that church even today is when you look at most of the pictures of Martin Luther King marching, you see two preachers next to him. One of them is a preacher who's still alive, that's 89 years old, Jesse Douglas. He was a CME preacher. You look
Mhm.
on the other side, you see of King, you see Raymond Graves. I grew up watching Raymond Graves up in Rochester, New York. And here it is. These two guys, every time you see King Martin, these two are on either side of him. That's the type of men and women that I was around, that they were real active. The evolution today is there's a group of us that we have an inaugural program tomorrow, and you're going to have one of the other ones on, Pastor James Thomas. We have an inaugural action tomorrow. We're clergy for Black Lives. And we're doing that because we believe in the movement. We subscribe to the movement. We've been around Black Lives Matter. The seven of us, there's two women, one's my wife, and five other preachers. And we've been around Black lives for the last 7 years, 6 or 7 years. And so we believe that the time has come that it's good, it's very healthy to support Black Lives Movement, and it's important. So you have to have a revolutionary type of theology,
Ooh.
and that's what Jesus lived. And so why can't we just expound on his life?
Pastor, it isn't so according to a lot of saints. Revolution is a bad word. It's like no, 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 sister, brother. You got to keep calm. You have to keep it down, especially when you say to attach yourself or to advocate or to partner with or to believe in the movement of Black lives. I read an article last night. The Catholic Church, they said, should we support Black Lives Matter? They said absolutely not, because they feel, just as well as other Black Christians, I had a debate with a young lady, that we as Christians should not attach ourselves to this movement because they feel there is a secret agenda to push gay agenda or gay priority. What are your thoughts on that? And could you help people understand the true intent of Black Lives Matter in the
Well,
movement, as well as what they stand for?
very, it's a very inclusive, it's very inclusive movement.
Mhm,
And you're right, it's global, and you bring in the whole village,
mhm,
and gay, lesbian, transsexuals, all of those are a part of it, because in my estimate, these are all children of God. And so we
mhm.
cannot ever exclude ourselves. When I talk, what about the adulterer? What about the fornicator? They're just they have their issues too. So I don't like when people begin to secularize it in some capacity. I think it's just important that we can embrace this movement. I don't even have to defend this movement. It's so powerful and so big. If you're not in it, it's unfortunate. If you just don't believe, it's unfortunate. I don't think, the first thing that they're fighting is the police state, is, as
Yes.
they like to say, violence, police violence against people. That's one of the stance that we take on that, and it's real important that we understand that, Miss Stevens. Other denominations, other religious bodies have their own issues,
Talk
and
about
so
it. It was I just saw an article where a religious group was trying to remove gays from the anti-lynching bill. And this is a
mhm,
religious group. So when we pick and choose as to what movement we're going to co-sign, what movement we're going to believe in, what movement we're going to fight for, advocate for, I think I think we must step back and take a look at, because this group is including everyone and they're not excluding people, because we all have rights, we all have a choice. I think that a
mhm,
lot of these religious groups need to understand that they're none good, none good.
mhm.
We all have sin. We are all
Yeah,
flawed. I think it's a beautiful
y-
thing for us to accept everyone for this
the
fight.
black, yes, Miss Stevens, the black church is extremely conservative,
Hmm.
and it has a very conservative roots. In the very beginning, there was a divide between the progressive. In the early 1900s, there was a divide between the progressive and the conservatives, and in that day, the progressive wing of the church was the wing that really wanted to keep everything, believe it or not, as it was, while the conservative was the one that wanted to change. But then it flipped. So, and in his book, Washington, John Washington talks about in the Negro Church. I think that's a book that many of your listeners ought to read and get, because it's Joseph Washington's work, because it really shows the evolution of our church and how the progressive wing wanted to move to high church, and they wanted to have a lot of, they wanted to have different music like white folks churches, and that was progressive, while the conservative wanted to keep it the same. And the conservative wing during that time was where the freedom fighters were coming out of during that period, until it changed in the 1940s, when the conservatives started satisfied and the progressives became more, and you had um, the development later on in the late 50s of the Progressive National Convention, one of the ones that Dr. King helped found. because they wanted to move in civil rights. They wanted to fight for civil rights. And so the other, George Johnson and that group of the National Baptists at that time wanted to stay where they were, stay away from the civil rights. So you have always had this struggle within the black church of should we get involved and should we not? And you know what? It's a healthy struggle. It's something we all think in our own ways we're following Jesus, but
Mhm.
there's enough churches out there for you to embrace the type of ministry that you want that fits your liberation struggle.
And let's talk about the white church, because what I've noticed, there's been a lot of pastors, and I have their names, like Louis Giglio. He mentioned white blessing, that slavery, the silver lining, it was a white blessing for, it set up the framework. Then we have Bill Johnson. He is a mega pastor, and he's been following Candace Owens. He's been agreeing with a lot of things that she spews, and she was the one to say that she does not agree or support George Floyd. We also have Rod Parsley, who said minorities basically need to get over it. These pastors, white pastors, are voluntarily exposing themselves as to who they truly are. Now, one Christian would say that this is God's way of exposing who they really are. Another Christian would say, well, no, the devil is just using their words to go against the ministry. What are your thoughts on a lot of the white pastors?
Well,
Yeah.
it goes back. They are a continuous, a continuum of preachers that go all the way back to slavery that taught the slaves to obey your masters.
Yes.
Anybody that does that, they weren't the John Browns. They were the common pastors there that said the white boys who would come in to preach and would simply say, obey your masters. But there were other black preachers even then, like John Brown and others, um, Jelena Brown and others who would secretly use the codes, and the codes were we're going to get to heaven, and their heaven was not, I mean, be careful, they would say, be patient because we're going to get to heaven. And the white master hearing that said, okay, yes, that's going to keep them docile.
Mhm.
No, that was a code. That was a code that the heaven was the north, that there was going to be a way, there was going to be a method that slavery would be overcome in some capacity. And so that message that these preachers began to preach, simultaneously with those who were preaching, obey your masters. So we see Parsleys, we see these guys, even doing civil rights. Remember the civil rights movement, the Jim Crow racism. Remember, these were the people that Martin Luther King from his Birmingham jail talked to, that you're being complacent. You're just there talking, but you're not doing anything. You're justifying the racism. You're justifying the foot
Yes.
on our neck and those types of things. And so they've always been here. What we have to do, while we fight the system, we're fighting them too. But
Yes.
we're letting our words and our deeds and our actions be more powerful than what they're saying. They're not. They don't have anybody on the streets. Nobody. They got people in houses, but they don't have anybody in the streets. There are people in the streets fighting for young people's fighting every day for the liberation. They're continuing the struggle, and
Yes.
some of them are listen. There are some of them go to some pastors who are real powerful. Even when in Ferguson there was a pastor up there that his church just blossomed during Michael Brown's killing in the aftermath because of what he was teaching and what he was doing. There are a lot of pastors, and you'll see them tomorrow at 12 o'clock at the forum when we're having our inaugural program of clergy for Black Lives. You'll see them. You'll see them tomorrow at 10 a.m. when they're for the Women's March that starts in Leimert Park. You'll see progressive men and women. You'll see a lot of female pastors tomorrow who believe that it's our moment, it's our time, and we got to be in the streets.
Well, brother, that sounds great. And I 100% agree. However, and I love Bishop T.D. Jakes, I've interviewed him quite a few times. but he has the same narrative as a lot of Black pastors, and he's doing a lot of multicultural platforms to talk to the parishioners. And what the voice is, not to be in this fight, but is to basically tame us, sit down, pray. And it is not to go out and fight. It is not to be on the streets. It is not to be in this revolution. They say it's fine to protest, but what are your thoughts when we must understand? To me, this is my opinion, and Pastor, you tell me, because the Black Panthers, they talked about, if there is to be change, we must expect some type of violence throughout this transition, and we're seeing this. And we're seeing this. So, with the parishioners, with the bishops letting us know to simply pray, what should we be doing? That should we be out on the streets? What are your thoughts to the people as Christians that are sitting there confused and they don't know what to do? What are your thoughts and your words for them?
Firstly, you can always have, and even Black Lives Matters talks this. They believe in peaceful protests and demonstrations.
I don't.
Um, you don't.
I do not. No.
Okay. Well, I do. I have to advocate that. I
Hmm.
believe that in my heart because I believe when you begin to get violence, it's just what happens to the Panthers. With the same people we're protesting against, they have a militia. They
Hmm.
can always outnumber African Americans in their firepower. I've never believed in violence because we can be outgunned, outmanned. But what
When you
we
say
can do,
violence, do you mean like, because in my mind it's for example, the rioting, things like that? Is that what you mean, or
uh,
do you mean something else?
I mean, with guns and violent overthrow and different and things like that. I believe with protests. Remember, riots are formed by people who have exhausted their means of conversation, as Dr. King has said. See,
Correct.
what we have to do, what the system has to do, the system has to create, and we have to force the system to create to attenuate the conditions that create violence, that creates riots. There are riots of people speaking up, overthrow. But then again, this country was formed around violence. This country was formed the violent way it took mothers from children who were slavery, the violent way that it took over the Native Americans, the violent way they treated horse thieves during the day, the violent way that they came into our houses and lynched us
Yes.
and shot us and killed us.
And
So there
still,
there is there's a history of violence. And as a sister said the other day, she said, it's almost like it's coming home. You stop violence and you'll see the end of violence. So there's always violence, but I won't advocate for violence, but I understand why there's violence.
mm,
I think there's other ways. I think there's going to be a violent, remember Dr. King put children in the streets that hoses and dogs attack. He put people's lives at, and and they understood that because they were willing to violently give up their life for the sake of freedom. And a lot of times you have to, when you engage in this type of work, you have to say, I'm going to do something demonstrative to make sure they get the point. And that's what's happening in the world today. That's what's happening. And there is a change that's happening. You, you
absolutely.
know, there is a change that's going on because of just people are out there and the masses of people. And then, when you look at the history of LA, one of the things you see that in 1965 and 1992, the uprisings, I don't call them the uprisings at that time, Sister Stevens, they
Okay.
were the uprisings, they were 95% to 97% African Americans. What we're seeing now in these protests when you go out there is 60% not 60% non-African American, to show you that it has changed. There is a widespread frustration on the part of everybody of what they're seeing. And like I always say, George Floyd was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
Sister Stevens, he was the sip of the drop of coffee that spilled over the coffee cup, and he was the rainfall that burst open the dam. And now that it's open, the dam's got to be fixed. The coffee cup has to be refilled, and the donkey and the horse has got to be rebuilt. And we, as the people, We're going to build it under our terms. There's a new dispensation in America and in the world because of this. And we're going to build a better, more demonstrative, empowered world. And you're going to see it because the new communities, as King said, is coming forth. And it's coming forth because of George, because of Brianna, because
Yeah.
of Aubrey, and because of all the other names of people, and going all the way back to our ancestors that were enslaved and that were lynched. Their blood is calling to us to act. Their blood, their bones in the middle passage are calling to us. Their blood on the soil of America is saying, rise up, stop it, the way
Mm.
we've been treated for 410 years. So
I
now
know.
look, if your church ain't down with a teaching and a preaching like this, you need to find a new church. That's who's ever out there. If you're not down, if you're not ready, and you're not prepared to do what it takes for the liberation of black folks today, you got to find another church.
Amen. They're just even afraid to even mention black. I have a question for you from one of our listeners, our viewers. Mr. James Farr said, is it up to the church? It's is the church and Christianity how we ended up with white supremacy? Isn't the church and Christianity how we ended up with white supremacy? I would agree with that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, see, the Christian church was founded by three people of African descent: Jesus, Tertullian,
Ooh,
and
brother,
Paul.
they ain't gonna
These three
like that, Pastor. They
these
ain't.
three people, Christianity was a black religion. It was
Mm-hmm.
formed, the Africans, Tertullian, and all of them helped after Paul helped build it, and it was the foundation on Jesus. It's always been a black religion, but when you had all these councils of Nicaea and everything, they just Europeanized it. And
Yes.
so when you European anything, that stream of racism comes in. So yes, the church has fought, caused a lot of stuff, but there's always been a liberation stream going back to even past King, when you have the social gospel and you had preachers, whites, black, who were part of the social gospel movement, who put the work gospel to work. And they helped during that era. They did a lot of significant things. And so there's always been there, and it's always been a fight. But you always have, whenever there's a fight, there's always two sides, and there's been a positive side to it. And we have to keep that stream going and that stream alive. And Jesus Christ allows us to do that.
Amen. Anthony Washington, one of our viewers, said, preach. Brother, I appreciate your time. There's just one more thing, and I'm going to let you go. A lot of people feel that the Jesus that, like you just said, it's been Europeanized. A lot of people don't even believe that Jesus had skin of bronze. They don't believe that his hair was of wool. They don't believe these things. And so a lot of people even feel that Jesus has been tainted in a way, and a lot of us don't even want him. When I say us, a lot of African Americans, a lot of black people, we don't want him because he's been
Mm-hmm.
tainted. What are your thoughts when it comes to that? And what's your advice for the people that are unsure about accepting Jesus as we move forward in 2020? Because right now we need him. It's a lot going on. So
Well,
what?
I cannot believe I would a life without Jesus for me personally. So let me just testify and witness about that.
Mhm.
Um, I always had problems, even as a little kid. I started in the ministry at 9 years old, and I had a problem always looking at Jesus through the eyes of a blonde, blue-eyed white boy. I just did.
Mhm.
And as I grew and I studied and realized that the area of the country, of the world he was in, the Afro-Asiatic aspects of his life, and then the overall, just the people that, and then I just realized that the pigmentation, those scriptures were really, just brought home to me. And so don't, you have been indoctrinated. You have been
Yes.
indoctrinated to believe in the
Yes.
blue-eyed white boy. And so that's okay. And then we say, oh, it does not matter the color of Jesus. It does matter because the white during slavery, that was the blue-eyed person they lifted up as a symbol that you had to obey. But
Yes.
when you could see the real Jesus for yourself, then you realize that, hey, it's okay. His color doesn't matter, but when I look in the mirror, I see the images of Jesus. I
Mm,
want my kids, they've always been taught, when you look in the mirror, you see the images of Jesus. You don't see a blind person, which is okay, but you see a person that is loving to everybody, that's here to save everybody. You see a being that has empowered us, that you can take that power for yourself and transform the world. It's one thing to say you know Jesus, but it's another thing to execute the life of Jesus in the world today. And that's why, if you ever read William Styron's work on the Confessions of Nat Turner, I mean, you saw the movie, but there were some odd things that Nat Turner said that people didn't refute. He said,
yeah.
I heard the voice of basically of the Christ coming to me and say, liberate the people. Now that's paraphrasing it. But however Jesus empowers you is really important. And so I just think we have to move forward and with the religion that you feel comfortable with. But I just tell you, there's another way if you're caught up in thinking that you have that Jesus was this passive person. Look how he went into transform the temple, the money changers, and what he did to the money changers, and said, get very thrustfully and argently, and so those are the types of things that the
Yes.
religion of Jesus Christ is about.
Well, I 100% agree with that. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. I'm just going to say this because, as a Christian woman, a lot of people, like I said, I do believe in the fight. There has to be a fight. I think that even
Yes,
in a
ma'am.
lot of people keep using Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and even with his protest of positivity, of forgiveness, of love, he was still assassinated. And I do feel that there is a role and that we all have a role. We each have a role. And
Mhm.
I think that we should use our gift as a sense of protest. As we sit here today for Juneteenth, we are celebrating freedom of religion. Because to me, a lot of us, like you said, we've been taught that it's blonde hair, blue eyes, and we must break free of that.
Mhm.
We must break
Yes, ma'am.
free of that. We must break free of that, and we must see the truth and the reality of it. And as we move forward in this 21st century civil rights movement, what are your last words to the viewers out there?
Well,
Anything else?
I like, just go to sclc-sc.org, our website, and join. We need warriors. We need people to help fight with us. Come out tomorrow. Our women of SCLC at 10 a.m. They're going to be having a rally for Breonna Taylor, and it's very important because the women's voice and the women's organization is led by my wife, Pastor Tim Bakile Crystal Coleman Smart. And you can come out at 10 a.m. in Lemert Park. They're going to march, and then they're going to and lift up Brianna and other women in the struggle. And then at 12:30, we'll be at the forum where Terrell Owens and Lisa Ray and other celebrities will be there as we lift up the first action of the clergy for Black Lives, and seven of us that have come together. And tomorrow and then today at 2 o'clock at the mall, starting at Dorsey High, there'll be a Black Lives Matter march for Juneteenth from 2 to 4, but we know it'll go longer. I mean, it's important that you let your voice be heard and your presence felt. And remember that we're going through a different period now. We're going through this is a reckoning. It's a reckoning of everything that has been done to Black folks are coming to a head now. This is the reckoning. You heard it from Pastor Smart. It's the reckoning. Everything that we lost, we're going to get back. Everything that's been stolen is going to come back. Everybody who killed us, there's going to be recompense. This is the great reckoning. You be a part of it. God bless you.
God
And
bless.
after that, after the great reckoning comes the beloved community. But there's got to be some reckoning first.
Amen, brother. What's that website again? SCLC.
Dash sc dot org.
Dot org.
sclc.org. Dot org.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add that there. Thank
Please.
you. I really appreciate it. And
Thank you.
yes, thank you so much for your time. This, everyone, I appreciate you watching it. Watching. Make sure you go to that website. There it is displayed on the screen. Again, today there is a celebration at Baldwin Hills Mall. Is that correct? It's
Yes.
starting at
Starting
Dorsey.
at, yes,
And then
Dorsey at
tomorrow,
2 o'clock.
the forum at what time?
The forum at 12 in Lamert Park at 10 a.m.
And are all of these free or is there
Free,
admission?
free, free,
Perfect.
free,
Perfect.
free.
Well, Pastor, thank you so much.
Thank
I
you, Miss
really
Stevens.
appreciate you. I know
Thank,
I've interviewed and talked to Bishop T.D. Jakes, Noel Jones, McClendon, and now I have to add Pastor Smart to my repertoire.
God bless you. Thank you so much,
Thank
Miss
you
Stevens.
so much.
You have a great afternoon.
Thank you. You do the same.
Okay.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Everyone, thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate that. That concludes phase one, part one of Juneteenth series, Freedom Talk. We are trying to free your mind, okay, of depression. We have a psychotherapist coming up at 1 p.m. We have free your mind of fear of getting a handgun. We have a firearm instructor at 12 o'clock. Next hour, coming up in about 20 minutes, we have another pastor. It will be part two of Church and the Racial Divide, and that will be Pastor Thomas. And after him, we have an attorney, Mr. Irvin Daphnis. He's going to speak to us on economic growth. That's right, transferring the black dollar. You guys, thank you so much. Please like, if you are watching right now, please hit that like button. Please leave a comment. And I just want to thank you so much. I will have more questions next time. All right. So thank you so much for the people who did have questions, like Mr. James Hart. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Anthony, for leaving a response. All right, you guys, I will see you in about 20 minutes for our next guest. Bye. And I'm trying to think, should I change my clothes? Now the sun is coming. See, my lighting is getting better already. Y'all see that? Trying to think, should I change or should I just go on and let it go? I don't know. All right. Bye.